Easy for everybody to retrace is when whatever artwork you look at, wherever you go, could be Alhambra, could be in a museum, could be in your own home, just stand in front of it. Don't force yourself to look at it, but try to notice what your eyes themselves are doing. And when an artwork by itself, by its contrasts, by its large, small contrasts, by its details or whatever, the colors or whatever, and it's not necessarily like a sunset beautiful painting. It can be anything. It can be abstract, can be figurative. But when it by itself evokes that your eyes start to keep roaming, you bet you're anything that the signal processing this view is strengthened. And that gives quite likely this sense of well-being, which obviously you also have with music or with other things. So it's artists are mostly unaware of this, but apply it all the time. You can see that through all ages and through all cultures. That it is visually, when we talk visually appealing, very often in our culture it's like almost like a bad thing, a techie thing. But visually appealing doesn't mean that it is only a nice subject or to look at. It can be also like Goya, which is not necessarily like always a subject you indeed would probably not like to put on your wall at home. But it is the kind of work by the execution in the paint and the alignment with seeing a figure which fascinates your brain without you making the decision. So it's a brain issue without the brain making the decision.
Perhaps my research is not only important at the color, form, or picture, but the body intention power. Yeah. Something behind the picture. You must not see all the things on the picture, but you sense. You sense. Yeah. And in the music, I try to is reached. Try do it. You don't hear the sound. Yeah. But you feel it comes into the body. Yeah. It's so less, but you get it. Yeah. And I don't know, it's in the brain or in the body.
Well, it's a bit like carving. Once during the process of carving that sculpture, where you can nearly become like the third person, and you say, who's doing this? Yeah. There's a takeover. I mean, there's probably some way of explaining that scientifically, but there's that energy. Do you call it qi in Chinese? I don't know, but it's that energy that's there. Whether it's that is definitely there, and it's sort of like, where is it coming from? Have no idea, but you really feel like the third person. You feel like you can nearly let the chisels go and stand back and watch it happening.
It's the conscious and the subconscious also, because we have all this narrative going on in our head, and some neuroscientists would say is a posteriori. There are some ideas that what we are doing, and then we are explaining why we are doing what we are doing. Now, I don't think that is true for everything. That may be true for the more instantaneous motor actions. Something reflective, like which college you're going to go to, is probably maybe not in that mode. But there is this famous readiness potential with somebody, French neuroscientist, Libet, showed that. So I asked you to just at will tap a finger, and I'm measuring just the potential between the top and the bottom, very simple measurement and looking at power in the beta bands. Like 1/5 of a second before you tap your finger, you can predict that you're going to tap your finger. So the idea is that you made up your mind to tap your finger, but you weren't aware of it. And then you became aware of it and said, I made the decision, but you actually made the decision. So there are some things which are of that nature, I think, where it is happening.
The universal spirit, and it's connecting with this other energy that infuses your body. And I feel it too. You get to a point in creation where you have a feeling that's not you anymore, and it's the ego is dropped.
But that still could be a brain process of
I'm sure it is. Your brain can play tricks on it.
I think I just wanted to mention it anyway. It also kind of a link to what Gordon also said is there are some subjects we all know play a role in liking to look at a work of art, like imperfection. And that still has to be researched. What is the reason for that? What would be the pattern that we prefer something which is not super perfect done? And you can check it yourself. And something is industrially perfectly made. It has some aesthetic appeal, you may say, but you immediately lose interest. And when you look even at the Brancusi sculpture, which is pretty close to perfection, but it's not. It's when you look at it, really, you can find the little discrepancies in every of his sculpture, like also the Solis piece. If this would be symmetrical, perfect, and purely industrially made, you know, your eyes and brain immediately go somewhere else. And that's also, like you said about music, that the real good musicians put in some oddities almost.
I think humans are very sensitive bullshit detectors.
Sensitive bullshit detectors, that's nice. Ilana?
Yes, if you have somebody who is very authentic, then you feel it automatically.
Yeah.
And that's the same with art. So
Yeah.
it does not have to be perfect.
No.
It has to be authentic.
I would even say it can't be perfect. And it has nothing to do with Allah or something else. It's just it works better to how our natural perception works.
It's because we're confronted with imperfect
Yeah.
things. And I mean, if we simply think about how quickly we can categorize faces or detect emotions in faces,
Yeah.
super fast, right? I mean, and it's often, if you look at how many things have to change in a face to go from, let's say, reasonably happy to really annoyed or so, you don't have to change so much. You're very well trained at detecting the tiniest facial muscle movements indicating anger, indicating something. And this is just an illustration of what we mean by patterns. I mean, these are not simple things necessarily. There could be very subtle changes, oscillations on perfection that matter. And again, creating art that matters to many people often may very careful, may imply being able to create these very important deviations that are very difficult to capture artificially, as you said, and they are definitely not perfection. But the fact that our brains are very good at detecting that makes it something that you can link to. The link is our brain's ability to detect these subtle changes that matter.
Context to imperfection, exactly what it's just somebody states on the internet that he made a huge database analyzing the style of Van Gogh, put in all the paintings, analyzing the style, and then pops out something like this, and then it's called artificial intelligence, blah blah blah. First, I doubt that this is just made by the machine, and because Van Gogh never would have painted such a tower, for instance, but that's a different thing. The main thing is when you focus indeed on the narrative, for instance, of the artist, or only on the style, it's maybe 10% of the whole story which explains the artwork. So if you only have then processed style, it doesn't bring you the real artwork. And again, Ben's work offers so much more because it also offers for you, without that you are aware of it, that you see the visual marks made by another human being. And if he would put this through a machine, something would pop out, maybe also nice and colorful, but it would not be able to attract your eyes and your brain like this, a piece like this does.
Humans are co-evolved with technology. I always tell people that don't be too impressed by the technology, because the best technology you carry around is right here. I think that modern, maybe we'll come to it later, so we should postpone that discussion. But this is of course made using some technology.
Yes.
And
his hands.
I feel that there are two phases of technological development. Technology rules human, and then the next phase is human rules technology. So when you're in the first phase, things are not very good. You're being, you haven't recovered your equilibrium, and we are still in that phase with much of modern technology.
I saw in 2015 an exhibition in Venice, in the Peggy Guggenheim, of reproduction, same size of Jackson Pollock. And they did it even with 3D printing and then colors on top. And first you think, is this a real color? But then you looked at the original and there's so much difference. Visually, it's difficult then to pinpoint all the differences, but you see immediately the difference. And so I agree, maybe one day, but it's still far away.
I mean, there's something, maybe we just jump to that because we're discussing it. The basic premise of modern machine learning is that it's very data-driven. It's lots of data. So what you see is essentially a replication of, it's a cut and paste of different pieces of language. There's no creativity.
No.
Now, and it's not cut and paste in a way that's pleasing, because I think that much of art is cut and paste. Artists take and cut and paste, but the cut and paste happens here. So the paste appears, it's more graceful. Somehow the cut and paste that is being done using the AI, even to the naive observer, is not impressive.
Yeah.
But it really has got to do with this question of what creativity is.
Yeah.
And it's different from randomness. It's different from generating something novel.
Yeah.
It's different from, it simultaneously has to be new and acceptable to the other. So there's that kind of biological component to it. And very clearly to those of us who are embedded in it, modern machine learning is very powerful, but it's not creative.
Make art, like make love. Also machine can do everything today, yes? Yeah, makes sense. And our things with body temperature and so.
Dangerous territory.
Yes, but.
So you can have your machine make love and you watch television.
Yes. But the human will something else, the communication, another people, not only machine.
Yes.
He can do everything, but I will.
You may have to make an actual human brain, and then you cannot do it with silicon.
Yeah.
So there may be reasons why, even without becoming a dualist, there may be reasons why we have capabilities technologically as machines that our machines don't have. In other words, our machines are very impoverished machines. So that's one way of thinking about it.
Well, I think Ning before mentioned the magic word for the next step in our program, food. So thank you for everybody, and I'll wrap up this discussion. But first I'd like to have your applause for our three main guests, for Moritz, Sparta, and Ning. Like I said at the start, don't be shy to talk to each other and about the subject or about anything else. Thank you.